Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to the Prose and Cons podcast, a podcast by writers for writers, because sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like cons. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I meant to say. Welcome. My name is Matan, Elul, and I'm hosting today. And today we've got a very nice episode that I've been dying to do for a while. It is an episode that is not about character. It's not about world building. It's not about narrative. It's just about the language, which is something that I think will be a lot of fun to do because we got, I think, 3.5 editors in the house and some other very good writers. With me today are a lot of people. There's 5 of us here today. Ali Burnham.
Hello, I'm Ali. I'm a screenwriter. I dabble in prose. I do a bit of teaching. I've done a bit of editing in the past. For general context, for what I'm doing, I'm very excited for this prose episode. Very excited.
We also have Alex Eldridge.
Hey, my name is Alex. I am a writer of a couple of years. I've published my own short story anthology, and more recently had a story published in the fiction edition of The Big Issue, which I was very excited about. Yeah.
James Healy.
Hello, I'm James Healy. I like to write horror and science fiction, and I do some editing as well.
And Phoenix Raig.
Hello, I'm Phoenix. I'm I got stuff to say. It's been a long day. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm Phoenix. I'm the founder of Bent Light Writing. That's a freelance editing house. We specialize in authenticity reading. We also do all the other stuff as well. I got a couple publishing houses I've edited for under the belt now, and I think about grammar with a large percent of my brain on a day-to-day basis. So I'm excited to, if anything, this will be therapeutic for me to just sort of like, talk about this.
Let it out.
Yeah.
So like I said, my name is Matan Elul. I'm also a writer for Precipice Fiction. I'm an English teacher on my day-to-day, and I do freelance editing. All right, we have a lot of content to go through, but as you listeners know, we like to start our podcast asking the members of the group what have they been reading. We'll try to do it extra fast today, but I still really want to know. Guys, have you been reading anything good, anything worth recommending or watching? Yeah, let's do the same order. Ali, what about you?
I will nominate an anime that I've been watching recently. It was my housemate suggested it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have dove into it. I'm so glad we're doing the grammar episode.
Also, I don't know the answer, by the way. Like,
I created a paradox.
Dabbed.
It's the Oran High School Host Club anime, and it's only 1 season long, and it is technically shoujo, so that's the style of anime that's aimed at younger women in Japan, if you're looking at the quadrant of demographic, which means it's usually about slice of life high school fun times. But look, it's very entertaining. I love it. It's very sweet. The characters are very endearing, and it's a show that makes fun of a lot of its own tropes. So it takes a lot of shoujo tropes, being like, oh, girls usually watch it for like this type of male character and this type of male character, and it just takes all those and makes fun of them, also revels in them at the same time. So it has its cake and eats it too. So I highly recommend Oran High School Host Club.
Is there a topic that does not have an anime? Like anything in existence has an anime, even a ping pong anime, I believe. Alex,
Yeah.
Are you the one who?
That's the joy of anime, is that it's just spiraling, endless. I'm just picturing this creature, this Hydra-like creature that will always keep sprouting limbs. It's
For every anime we kill, 2 more will appear.
yeah.
Oh no. Alex, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I've been watching a show with my girlfriend called Escort Boys. We refer to it exclusively as sexy French nonsense. The premise is yeah, it gets worse. The premise is there's a bunch of guys who are trying to save their father's beekeeping ranch, and so to do that, they become prostitutes. And this is set in the Camargue in France, which is
Of
near
course.
Marseille. Yeah,
Of course.
it's
So
actually really good. It's really funny. Yeah, we
Excellent.
just finished that and I really enjoyed it. It's very silly.
Wait, is it like Emily in Paris good, or is it like
Oh, I mean, it's
is
look,
is it good, or is
it's
it good
look, it's
stuff?
reasonably well plotted. The characters are like there. They're and the cinematography is pretty good. So like it's not spectacular, but it's worth a watch, you know.
Is it on the Emmy to Razzie they're called? On the Emmy to Razzie scale, where is it?
Oh, I'd say it's closer to Emmy. Yeah, no, it's good. I like
Okay,
it.
fair enough. That's what I wanted to know. Cool. Thank you, Alex. That was great. James.
Yeah, I've just been reading parts of The Two Towers by Lord of the Rings. I've read it before, so I'm sort of just skipping from chapter to chapter. And I'm also still
Nice.
reading Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, which in terms of grammar just throws all of the grammar rules out of the window and just plays around with punctuation and sentences that run on and stuff like that. So, a very nice contrast between the two.
Very nice. Phoenix, to you.
My partner and I have been rewatching Schitt's Creek and love that show very, very much. Excellent every time. I'm also finally finishing Attack on Titan. Watched the first
Ooh.
season, got emotionally exhausted because it was just so heavy and I had to stop. Started again with fervor, like really went. Stopped around season 3 for the same emotional exhaustion. Finally picked it up. This is about 10 years, or I don't know, since it started. I forget when it started.
Yeah.
Finally cruising
I-
through to the end. Finally making it. Still, every time I turn it on for my Attack on Titan times, it's like, all right, time to be intrigued, but also a little bit sad.
I'm about 4 episodes from the end as well. I'm like,
Ooh.
we're only doing like 1 ep a day because you can't binge that shit.
Could anyone in this Zoom conversation legally drink when that show started?
When did it start?
Oh,
I don't think.
Well-
Oh, maybe unless I was just late to the game, but I may have just been able to.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I
I don't think
so.
I could because it's 21 in the States, and I think I was 19 or something like that.
Okay.
I think I could have. I don't know whether I
Listeners,
should have.
listeners, Google Attack on Titan season 1, and you can reverse engineer our ages. Okay, let's go. I'm so excited for this episode. All right, so I've sent you guys tips by a very famous writer, George Orwell of the very well-known 1984 and Animal Farm. He basically came out in an interview, I believe, or an article, and he gave his 6 tips for writing. So we're starting off at full speed. Before we go into all the terms, what is alliteration, metaphors, personification, all that kind of stuff, let's go over this overview by this very successful writer. I asked you guys to go over them and kind of either praise one of the rules or tear it apart. So for the sake of you guys too, I'm going to share my screen with the rules so you have them in front of you, and I'm going to read them out loud for the readers. Readers, if you are watching on YouTube, you get to see them. Okay, how to write Orwell's rules for worthwhile writing. Number 1, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. Number 2, never use a long word where a short one will do. Number 3, if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Number 4, never use the passive voice where you can use the active voice. Number 5, never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. And finally, break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. All right, these are the rule guys. Who's ready to give their thoughts?
Yeah. I'll start with the top one. I think never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech. I think this is great because as soon as you, let me think. So, like, if you say, I'm trying to think of a really, really lame metaphor, but basically, as soon as you say something that you've heard before or you're used to saying, or like, she was quick as a whip, once you hear that, it's a cliche. Like, if you can summon that as like, oh yeah, I'm used to hearing that one. It's by definition a cliche. So you want to avoid cliches when you're writing, unless you're sort of using the tropes deliberately or trying to trying to subvert them or something. So yeah, I think that's really a really good strong one to start with. Interesting that it's the first one as well. So to me, that says he's like, don't be trite, don't be unoriginal. Make sure whatever you're doing, it's original. So yeah, I think that's good.
I think that some metaphors, we kind of think we can get away with it because we're tired and we've written 3,000 words today. And maybe, you sit into yourself and you think, oh, I can just write tough as nails. No one's going to hold it against me. I'm just trying to make it, But I think we kind of forgive ourselves more often than we realize for these metaphors.
I find that when it creates it's a cool like little invitation to see what else you can do there. And when you see something like tough as nails or quick as a whip, and instead of letting yourself use it, turn it into a little game. It's like, all right, what if I'm not allowed to say that here? How else would I say it? And then usually that ends up expanding into something pretty cool if you suddenly don't let yourself use it.
Yeah, I would say the same for never use the passive voice, where you can use the active voice. I find that I have a lot of sentences that have was or had in them, where I could probably come up with another way of saying that sentence where I would take either of those words out. And it's almost always immediately a better sentence, particularly if I start thinking of like, is there another way for me to say this? I think once I find another way of saying it, it sounds better, but again, it also sounds more original and more dynamic. So I think that's
Just for that's a very good point. Just for the sake of the readers, I want to explain super quick what is the passive voice. And I'm going to do it with an example that a lot of us see, use, read in speculative fiction. Let's say you're writing an action scene. You have two ways to write it. Instead of writing, he was kicked in the face by Josh, you could say Josh kicked him in the face. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it does provide more agency to a certain character. In the second version, Josh is taking an action. Sometimes you would like to use the passive voice, especially if the he, whoever he is much more important to you. But a lot of times, the active can be better. Another tiny comment I want to make is that sometimes writers give limbs control of the sentence rather than characters. Check out this one. Alex punch the man in the mouth. Okay, and here Alex is, doing what he has to do, punches the man in the mouth. Some writers, maybe they're trying to spice it up. They might go, Alex's fist crashed against the man's mouth. Now, it sounds nice, I'm not saying punched, the fist crashed. But if you look at this sentence, who is the subject of the sentence? Who is the hero of the sentence? It's actually the fist. And overuse it, and it kind of feels weird because who's taking the actions, Alex or his body parts? Right.
I love those examples. But the passive voice rule was going to be one of the ones, if you asked us to disagree with one of them. So the top three, hard agree. The bottom two, I was going to be like, oh, maybe there's wiggle room. But also, caveat, maybe I'm a hack and not a good writer. But the passive voice one, I found myself I'm like, what's the creative room to play with, especially with something like Cypress I've been writing recently, which is about a convict sent to the other side of the world, especially at the start, doesn't have a lot of control over what's happening to him. A lot of things are being done to him. So I found a few of my organic sentences were passive. I've removed as many egregious ones as possible, but there are a few that I'm like, I actually kind of want to keep a few of these passive sentences because they are implying that things have happened to him. And it's just this accumulative effect. I tried to find an example just quickly before the podcast. So one sentence I've left in is, I'd been sentenced to Sarah Island for my repeated attempts to escape. If I was to make that active, it would be, say, the authorities sent me to Sarah Island. They sentenced me to Sarah Island. But if those were the options, I really wanted to avoid giving too much attention to the authorities. This is a main character making it about himself. So I had been sentenced. It almost, with his worldview, he's not giving them credit for what's happened to him. So I feel like there's some creative play with passive voice. I agree not to overdo it, but that's just me coming in with a little bit of a defense of maybe when passive voice works.
Absolutely. I think Ali, you made
Yeah.
a terrific point. I definitely agree with you. Also, grammar books will tell you that the correct time to use the passive is when the action is more important than the one doing the action. In this case, him being sentenced is the star of the sentence rather than the authorities or they. So I'm with you on that one. Phoenix,
To
you want
me,
say something?
to me, that one feels like a little bit like show versus tell, where it's like a lot of the times, kind of in the back of your mind, you have the question, could I show this rather than tell this? And there are times where the answer is genuinely no. It's like, no, this is a tell situation. It feels like that to me. It's like, can I make this more active? Yes, sometimes it's like, I actually don't want to. Like, this actually feels appropriate. So it's just something to have in the back of your head, and it's like posture check. It's like active check, like just, what can you do here?
Very nice. Anyone else wanted to support or maybe argue against one of these tips?
I'd like to approach them as a whole. I think what he's saying through most of these things is, if possible, let's say, so like never use a long word where a short one will do. If possible, cut a word out. Those two in particular, but all of it seems to be lending itself to simplicity and to brevity. So it's that old Einstein chestnut of make it everything as simple as it needs to be and no simpler. And if you read his prose, it's very much that. It's as simple as it needs to be, but nothing's left out. So it's most of this to me strikes that balance of like, hey, how can we simplify this without reducing it to the level of children's fiction, which is its own thing.
Yeah, and I'll again, I really agree with the first three, and I agree with the spirit of the bottom two. Again, I just want to argue devil's advocate against the never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or jargon word when you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Again, Cypress is an example. I have a main character who is supposed to know more about ships and navigation than the reader. And one of the mechanics I'm using to achieve that is this character uses a lot of jargon, uses a lot of naval terms that the reader's not meant to know. I kind of hope the reader just picks up on the context. They can just read, it just flows over them, it washes over them, is how it's meant to land. They're like, oh, I don't know what a forecastle is, but William does, and I trust William because he knows boats, is how it's meant to land. So I'm trying to use jargon in a very specific character building way, I suppose, and I guess a world immersive way. I think even when we're writing in spec fiction, I think we're tempted to do this a lot. I think it can definitely be overdone, but if you're writing, you want to use jargon as a world building tool. You're like, oh, this character's using, I don't know what that word is. Is it part of the magic system? Is it a very specific landmass? And using one of those very specific words can help create an unreality if that's what you're attempting to do as a writer.
I think Cyprus is a good example for that, specifically because it also occurs in a very different time, very different era. So it's naturally going to have the words of that era, of that geographical locations. I like these tips as a whole. One tip I would like to kind of argue against is the never use a long word where a short one will do. And that's something I will touch on in a second. I think it could be corrected for never use an overly complicated word where a simple one or a clear one can do, because speaking against long words ignores the fact that some words have a certain rhythm. And we're going to talk about that when we get to alliterations. There's a music to the language that should not just be relegated to poetry. If you pick up Patrick Rothfuss, sometimes you look at the lines and you're thinking there's a music to the prose. Some people will say it's too flowery, some people love it, but I don't think we should just limit ourselves to words of certain length. Maybe a better way to phrase it would be use clear words, words that are known to your readership. Don't send them to a dictionary.
Yeah, I just like for the long words and the jargon as well. To me, well, actually, I'll separate those, and really, I'll just comment on the long words. To me, the more I get into this, the more long / more sort of sizzly words is kind of how I feel them now. The more they feel like kind of like a fine spice. It's like the vast majority, like 99% of your work should be just like simple. Like don't bog down your sentences. Don't make your readers like need to focus on the individual words to try to piece together what the sentence is saying. You want to keep them in it. You want to make them unaware that they're reading. Just let the story just zap right out of the book right into their mind, sort of thing. But then every now and then, just like you got them, just like throw in a little sizzler, like just like pew, whatever, serendipitous, pew, whatever it is, and then or that's not even a super big one, but just like throwing one in every now and then. Sometimes I'm reading and I just like every now and then, like, you know, J.K. Rowling will throw in a little poetry and it's just like, ooh, J.K., what are you doing? Hey, like,
I love it.
I see you. You're not just Harry Potter here. You got other things going on. In that sense, they could be great, but if you overuse them, it does not take many at all to weigh down a sentence, to even weigh down a page. Like if you have 3 or 4 on a page, that page is already feeling pretty heavy.
With that same point on the long words versus short words, I find I would disagree with that one, just because I find that I quite like to play around with pacing in terms of like sentence length, because you can affect how quickly someone will read a section. So I quite like the idea of lengthening out the sentences a little bit with like larger words and then shortening them down and using short direct words when it gets towards, because I write a lot of horror, when you're getting towards the meat of what you want to do. So you can affect the pacing a little bit by having the reader unconsciously slow down and then speed up and then slow down and then speed up. So again, it plays with the rhythm.
That's cool.
Bit, like Phoenix was saying. Yeah,
that's very cool, especially for the genre that you're very good at, horror, where you want to basically control the atmosphere by choosing what kind of sentences you use. All right, thank you guys for that. That was excellent. I want to talk about a bit of the technicalities. A lot of words are being floated out there, like metaphor and simile, and I wanted to go over some of them. I am shamelessly stealing the beautiful slides made by my poetry professor, so I might credit you in the comments, poetry professor, after I get your permission. Anyway, let's get back to the slides. I don't want to say his name. Just he says like, no, don't involve me in your podcast, you youngster. So poetic terms and symbols. We're not going to see all of it, but this is the big one. By the way, who can guess the metaphor that we are seeing? Just for the sake of our listeners.
Glass half full.
Glass half frozen. Oh, sorry.
Glass half frozen.
Oh,
I love that.
Nice. Okay, a metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech in which something is compared to some unrelated thing. The difference between metaphors and similes is that similes, well, that's my professor's wording, similes hit you over the head with a comparison by using explicit words such as like or as. All right. We think we understand. Let's, life is an hourglass. Okay, we're going to skip that. Good, just, you know, some boomer humor. Let's skip that too. All right. Similes and metaphors. Can I go into teacher mode and ask one of you guys to read it? Phoenix, read the similes for us, please.
How did I get here? Okay. Her heart is like gold. The world is like a stage. He eats like a pig. You are like a rock. Your eyes are like sunshine, poor as dirt. That was a wild ride for me just then.
I think your Irish accent would lend itself to the metaphors. Go, James.
Her heart is gold. The world is a stage. He is a pig. You are a rock. You are my sunshine. Sea of sand.
Beautiful. Let's focus on this for a second. He eats like a pig. He eats like a pig. That's the simile. He is a pig. That's the metaphor. I'm throwing the ball back to you guys. We know what a simile is. We know what a metaphor. I don't want to go into the discussion of which one is better. Let's talk about them as a whole. What makes a good one and what makes a bad one? Obviously, we talked about repetition. If you could maybe tell me what makes a good metaphor for you guys, if you can come up with some.
Well, the thing I like about metaphors is that they are very extrapolable, right? So you can have a metaphor like, I'm totally blanking on one. Like he was, he was a lion in his bravery and loyalty. That's really trite. But let's say you took that. You can have that as a line in a book, but without getting too much into the structural stuff, you can also extrapolate that out to like, that is his arc, like he grows up and he starts cowardly and he becomes braver over the course of the book, and then someone harks back to that. So why I like metaphors is you can kind of concertina them out and then you can push them back into a very succinct thing. I don't know whether you can say the same thing about similes.
Alex, let me follow up on what you just said then. I really want to ask you, how many metaphors are too many metaphors for real estate on a page?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Look, I wouldn't do more than, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I wouldn't do more than 2 on a page, I don't think. Just thinking out loud. Probably not. It depends, like how long is a piece of string? Like I don't know. That would be my token guess, but I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Too polite.
Yeah.
I was going to say the other way of thinking about that is mixing metaphors. So, for example, that 2 on a page example for Alex is if you're using 2 different images, if you're asking the reader to do 2 different mental gymnastic exercises. I'm picturing this. Oh, now I've got to picture this. I like thinking of it of how much work you're asking the reader to do. But say if you've got an extended metaphor, so you're only asking to compare one thing to another thing, but perhaps you actually have an entire paragraph that's doing the work of it's comparing it in this way and it compares in this way and this way, and you can kind of, it's the same image. You're not mixing the metaphor with anything else, but it could actually be a longer exploration of that one metaphor is probably I think you can have as much fun with that as possible. There's some literary novels where like a whole chapter could be that exploration of a metaphor like that. It just pulls it out and out and out and out. So it's the whole thing can be quite metaphorical, but it's just doing that shaping thing. So I guess I was going to say a bad metaphor is when the images are mixed, when it wants to compare something shiny to something also simultaneously rough. So you're asking the reader to be like, oh, it's that, but it's that. And then you're like, well, wait, what am I actually picturing now?
Exactly. And that's the point I wanted to get to, is like metaphors are cool and they add a lot, but when you're using a metaphor, are you really showing something to your reader? You're telling them, you're giving them a different kind of significance. You're saying she was like the moon reflecting on the lake. Okay, I get it. She's beautiful. But do I have any idea what kind of image I should have in my head? It's a game of balance, really, because you do have to put something on the figurative screen. You cannot just talk in metaphors and riddles.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they need
to keep adding on to that, I've just implied that this woman has a lot of friends and is very social, and then I immediately compare her to the moon. That's a mixed metaphor, right? Because we already come with this baggage that the moon is this solitary figure. It's in the sky on its own. So if I've just said, oh, she's super social and she's like the moon, again, you're kind of like, well, wait, that you've implied different things to the reader. So that's when metaphors can get messy. And just before moving on, it was interesting hearing the a simile hits you over the head with it, because that's not quite, well, it works, but I remember a primary school teacher of mine, to hammer in the difference between a simile and a metaphor, said, a metaphor, it is the thing. You are telling someone that this is that. While a simile is the softer version. It is something is like something. It's as if it is something, rather than it is definitely this other thing, which is the metaphor. So in my head, I've always thought of metaphor as the harder version of a softer simile.
It's a little bit more transparent, a simile, in terms of its the craft, because you're being like, hey, I'm kind of pulling back the curtain a bit here. Like, you know, I'm not trying to convince you this thing is that. I'm actually using language to let you know, hey, I'm comparing something here. So I guess it's a little bit more, because I know what Matan means here. I guess it's a little bit more open about the artifice of it, but a metaphor is much more direct in a way, because you're like, this is that. So it's, yeah.
I just want to let Phoenix say one thing, and then I want to show you an example of a tip I have about that.
I just remember when I first learned about simile, metaphor, and that sort of thing, metaphors felt like such a commitment to me. And I was like, I'm just saying it's the thing. It's like commit, like tell me it's that thing. But I find that so when, like Alex was saying, 2 on a page might be too much, it's like I would say the same, but it's in the context of if they're kind of like, if you're just describing like maybe the anchoring scene to a reader, like describing the environment, describing whatever it is, and instead of just kind of describing the space, you're getting a little bit too like, and the leaves were like dancers, blah 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 blah, and the ground like the Taurus's back or whatever it is, and you just keep going metaphor hopping to describe the ambience. It's like, all right, just calm down a little bit. Let's just simplify it. Let's just say what it is. Like, let's just, and then just like, and then get a little poetic from time to time. Or in that case, because I do this sometimes, I find metaphors really useful when to me, they feel like a great tool for translating things that normally can't be conveyed to the senses. So like, if I want to convey an emotion to someone and gets the reader to feel a particular emotion, I might give it in the form of a metaphor that translates it to something physical. So like, her sadness was pennies dripping down her throat, like something, just get something metallic in there. I want sensations and textures.
Nice.
That's what I use metaphors for, is like to get a bit of synesthesia in there.
In poetry, what you just did is called the grounds for the metaphors, which is how much of a relationship there is realistically between the things that we're comparing. That was very well said. I want to show you guys an example. Listeners, I'm going to say it out loud. Viewers, you can see it. I'm going to share my screen again. I want to show you an example where a metaphor can, in my opinion, my humble opinion, can enhance a text, and when it can actually weigh down, where the version without the metaphor is stronger. So, Alex, I'm going to use you permanently as my example guy. I hope you don't mind. Check this out.
As long as I'm not
We're going to take a
punching anyone else
sentence. No. Alex walked proudly down the school. All right. That's all right. Here, a certain metaphor can really help us. We can say that day at school, Alex was a peacock. All right. Now, this is a metaphor that I think can actually enhance the text. All right. It tells us a lot. We can see something. We can see an imagery. A peacock has a way of strutting, a way of walking. And it tells us the pride. On the other hand, sometimes if we use a well-worn metaphor, if we just replace it with a descriptive line, we might end up with a nicer sentence. Check this out. Alex, you're going violent again. We're going to do something I said not to do, but Alex's sword, okay, cut through the man like butter. All right, that's a metaphor, right? A simile, sorry.
Wait,
And now we're just going to say Alex's sword cut through flesh and bone. Now, the bottom one does not have a simile in it, right? Like, it cut through flesh and bone. We're being very straightforward. Exactly what the sword did, literally. Sometimes the metaphors are just the easy way out of actually going into the interesting details that can have the powerful effect. It's not a rule that applies all the time. That's your job as a writer, to try to find a way to say things that will have the desired effect.
So
yeah, I guess in that example, like picturing flesh and bone is far more interesting and applicable to the moment than trying to picture butter. Because butter is yummy on toast and is a good thing. But you're describing a violent situation. So flesh and bone and uncomfortable things is way more applicable to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's like the first version, like kind of PGifies it a bit, you know. It makes it a little bit more like friendly. It's more like, you know,
Kind
this
of
could be a
weird
kid.
too.
It is a bit weird. It's like the food thing as well makes it like unsettling in a weird way. Like there's a way to work that into a piece of prose that would be very effective in a strange way, but it certainly puts a different emphasis on what's happening. Like having anyway. Yeah, I think the second version is much more effective in just conveying the message, generally speaking.
I was just going to say it's like oddly whimsical. It just feels kind of
Yeah.
a bit off.
It feels like he's
All right.
very high in that situation. Like he's in another. He's experiencing something very different.
Like if it was a Hannibal Lecter situation, like that
Conan
similar
the Barbarian
kind of
on edibles.
You
I
feel
like
like
to
whoever
also-
is observing this is like completely not bothered by the fact that someone's been cut in two. They're just kind of like, oh, what a smooth cut.
For an interesting metaphor, you
So
can
warm that
flip
sword
it.
up a little bit.
You can flip it and make it so they cut through butter like flesh and bone, and it's like,
Oh, that's very
Oh,
unsettling.
whoa.
the
Yeah.
butter had been
Okay,
hardened
that's
in the
sociopath
fridge.
shit.
I
Yep.
think we need a trigger warning before that one.
Yeah.
All right.
Cut that.
Please, guys, if you give examples, please use Alex. Okay, there are rules to this episode.
Alex cut through butter like flesh and bone.
Okay, I have.
That's so uncomfortable to hear.
Okay,
Metaphors, baby.
Class. I have an open question that I want to give you guys. But before I give the open question, I really want to go real quick to through two terms that I think are useful. I'm going to do it quickly, and then I'm just going to throw the ball back to you guys with one of the questions. The first thing I want to mention is when we're thinking about techniques on how to make our writing more pleasing, it's not just metaphors and similes. These are the easy ones. These are the ones everybody know. But there are tricks of the language. Sometimes your reader might not even know why they like a sentence. And one of the ones I've discovered recently is called alliteration. Has anyone ever heard about that term?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So again, alliteration is something we borrow from poetry, but in prose it can work really well. It's when you use two words, usually back to back, but sometimes with a preposition between them, that start either with the same letters or the same consonant or the same sound. This is the kind of things that when you read it in a sentence just feels right. For example, a disposition to disobey. All right. There's something about it. Marvel characters are notorious for that. Peter Parker, Otto Octavius. It makes them memorable. You can use it in sentences. Sometimes it's the first two letters. Craving a good cry. Okay, we have two words in between, but you have a lot of tricks like that with the language that you can use to kick up your prose. Beyond that, one thing that I've seen used a lot is something called sentence fragments, which is when you have little bits of sentences. Grammatically, it is not correct to write in that way, but incomplete little sentences that work together. And I was hoping to read you guys a tiny paragraph from Charles Dickens, and after that, we'll go back to the question, just to show you how he uses repetition and sentence fragments for extra effect. It's from the book Bleak House. Fog everywhere, fog up the river, where it flows among green heights and meadows. Fog down the river, where it rolls defiled among the tears of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Fog on the Essex marshes, fog on the Kentish heights, Fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs. Fog lying out on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships. Fog trooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats. Fog in the eyes and throats of ancient Greenwich pensioners, wheezing by the firesides of their wards. Fog in the stem and bowl of the afternoon pipe of the wrathful skipper, down in his close cabin. Fog cruelly pinching the toes and fingers of his shivery little prentice boy on deck. Chance people on bridges peeping over the parapets into a nether sky of fog, with fog all around them, as if they were up in a balloon and hanging in the misty clouds.
That was very nice.
Yeah, great. Good little bit of alliteration in there too.
Yeah, you have alliteration, you have sentence fragments, you have, I would say, simplicity. The language might feel very rich because it's from a different time, but there's a simplicity here with the repetition, with the locations. Did anyone find metaphors or similes at all?
Yes, yeah. There's one where it says it pinches the fingers of the apprentice boy. I think that was there. Pinching the toes. Yeah, Fog cruelly pinching the toes and fingers of his shivering little apprentice boy on deck. Like it's personifying the fog there. The whole thing is personifying it in a way.
Last sentence is a simile, isn't it?
Yeah.
As if they were up in the clouds.
So that's it. I just wanted to share it and just to remind our readers that it's not just metaphors and similes in your toolbox. There are a lot of things you can do to make your writing more appealing. And now, the big question I wanted to ask you guys before we move on to the game, which I'll explain more later. I'd like to hear from each of you guys something that we as editors and as writers have faced quite a lot, the statement, you need to tighten up the prose. This is not tight enough. It could be tightened. It could be polished. What do you guys mean when you say that, or when you get that as a feedback?
So when I'm thinking about tightening prose, so mechanically, I will go through a paragraph and literally try to cut words. I'll see if I can cut a word from a sentence, cut some words from a paragraph, just trying to make it shorter. So I will do that at that level, but then I will also think about what I'm actually trying to say. So if I've taken, I'll read it back and I'll be like, look, these 3 sentences are kind of all making the same point. Like, obviously I've been first drafting, I've been trying to get this point out, and it's taken me 3 sentences to hone in on it. So while I'm editing, I'm like, look, I can say this in 1 sentence. It doesn't need a ramp that's 3 sentences long to get to this point. So first drafting, it usually takes me those 3 sentences to find out what I'm trying to say, but the joy of editing, I can be like, oh, that final sentence, I finally arrived at my point. Go, Ali. So I can rip out the other 2 or find some weird Frankenstein version of all 3 sentences. I'll just get to pick and choose my favorites. So that's what I think about when tightening, is just, can this whole thing be said in a single sentence? Can I really hone in on what I've actually tried to say, as well as the mechanics of actually ripping out words and making it shorter?
Beautiful and very functional, very practical.
Yeah, I would say when I'm going through, and let's say every draft is different. Every draft you have a different focus. You're trying to cut, usually, is the main thing, but also you're trying to make things flow better. And you want to, basically, when I'm going through something, say a final to semi-final draft, I want to make sure that the big words in each sentence are saying exactly what I want them to say, and I want them to say it in the way that I want them to say it. So if you change a word, sometimes that can kind of mess up the flow of the sentence a little bit. So you want to make sure that when you're going through it, you are selecting words and then selecting. It's very hard to, like, in contrast to what Ali's saying, which is very practical, this is very, very intangible. But you want to make sure that the way you're writing your sentences flows correctly with the specific words you're saying. So, like, if you were like, he walked to the school bus. He was going to be late. You might want to look at that and go, okay, well, is that the most effective way to communicate that? And you might think, well, no. You might say something like, being late, he ran for the school bus, right? You might try and condense that into a smaller fragment to get across the stuff there. So yeah, just be careful with your word choice, essentially. Oh, and one other little tip from my primary school teacher. She always said, if you have to use the word and then, have a look at that. You probably don't need at least one of them, and you might be able to take both of them out. So if you need to use the words and then, recalibrate that.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one. So you were practical in the end, Alex. You sneaked some practical advice in there.
I gave you just a tiny little tidbit.
Yeah, kind of like, I'd be kind of doing the same thing. Trying to take out all the extra sentences, take out all the extra words. Definitely trying to see if like I can turn a couple of sentences into one sentence, if they can just be one idea, or if a long run-on sentence should be separated into different sentences. If something should be taken out of one paragraph and moved somewhere else, I like the idea of each paragraph being a separate step or a separate idea of the story. And then if you can manage to get it so that a paragraph is doing, if you can get it that a sentence or a paragraph is doing more than one thing than just what's happening, if it can be representing something else, maybe that can make for like very economic writing. But I'm always just trying to take out everything that doesn't need to be there and make what is there be doing what it's supposed to do as effectively as possible, and then possibly doing one or two other things as well. I do also like to run through and make sure that each paragraph, if you can set it up so that each paragraph ends with the most interesting or striking part of what that paragraph is supposed to be about, or if each sentence can end with the most striking part of what that sentence is supposed to be about, then it can make for like quite just dialogue that like really or not even just general prose that really flows. So I think that's what I'm usually trying to do with everything.
That's
just tidy it up.
That's so good. That's so good, James. I really want to support what you said about guys. The beginning and the ends of paragraphs are the gold spots. I'm serious. I'm so serious about this. Important information should not be revealed in the middle of a wall of text. And you know what? If you got a killer metaphor, that shouldn't be in the middle either. A killer metaphor should finish your paragraph or start it. Probably finish. But yeah, the middle parts is for the boring stuff. I mean, try not to have boring stuff in your book, but the middle stuff is the boring stuff. Excellent advice, James.
Yeah, no, you've described a beautiful like shape your paragraph should have. It should be like a stepping stone, and then pow, this is what I've been working towards. This is the point I'm making. And like every paragraph should almost have that, every sentence should have that shape. It's a beautiful almost build a metaphor I've got in my head when you're going through, and you'll just carve each sentence to have that shape. No, it's really good advice.
It's like a trail of ideas, I guess.
Yeah. And the other thing you said about clarity, I think, is very important, because this is something I'm aware of that I need to work on, and I'm trying to be aware of in my editing, is making sure each sentence only has a single idea. I think when I was first getting more serious about learning to write prose, I wanted to put all my ideas into every sentence. It's almost like a kid's found these tools for the first time. I just want to pour all these ideas out. So I would have a sentence that would both describe the sensation of how the clothes felt, and then also the visual of where they're standing. And I'd make it into one run-on sentence. But now I'm trying to make sure my sentences only focus on kind of one idea, and not just making them a bit too big and confused. And again, asking the reader to picture too many sensory things in a single sentence, just containing it to really sharp ideas.
That's very good too. Sometimes just having one sensory concept per paragraph could be good, because it would stand out, and then in the next one you can do the smell, and maybe in the next page you can do the touch. But yeah, thank you. Phoenix, you're an editor. You're like a real editor. Tell us, how do you tighten prose?
Just little therapy moment. I'm working with 4 clients at the moment. In the next 3 days, I just helped someone. I'm helping someone with like a series, like over 200,000 words. I'm helping them with right now. At the same time, I have 3 children's books. Whew! And I'm just like, it's how did I get here? This was a genuine
We love you,
therapy moment.
Phoenix.
Thank you for hearing me. Anyway. So this is a very little tip, but it's a tip that I give a lot. Over punctuation tends to be a thing, and I find it a lot with people that are fairly new to writing. They use a lot of exclamation points, and exclamation points are really not needed at all. Or not at all. They're needed far, 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 far less than as well as
I'm so with you.
bolding, italics, formatting in general. One quick little way to tighten up and just make it look cleaner and less messy is to cut out a lot of exclamation points, remove all the formatting of the text, or at least reduce it to, I tell people all the time, like, less is more with these things. If it's in there a lot, the text starts to look really messy, as well as it's a diminishing returns thing. If so many words are italicized, suddenly the emphasis is withdrawn. If so many things have exclamation points on them, suddenly it loses its meaning a little bit. But if you pull it back to literally cutting like 98% of these, that 2% that's going to be in there is going to hit so much harder. Not to mention, like seriously, you can cut 98 to 99% of your exclamation parts, chances are. Just let the text speak for itself. You want your tone and the characters to hold the emphasis of how much emotion is in a given moment, how words sort of sound in the reader's head. If the tone is set well and the characters are well established, you don't need to use a bunch of exclamation points in there. They're just going to hear it in their heads, and the words very often will carry themselves. So that's something, as well as don't be afraid to end a sentence. It's very easy to just one thing that I do a lot when I'm cleaning copy is like it will just be and it's one of my favorite little edits to make. It feels so good every time. It's just like they have this large Jenga tower of a sentence. I'm just like, nope, cut that there, 2 ideas, boom, boom, there you go. Way cleaner, way easier to read. And it's so easy to do. Paragraph breaks as well, jumping on what James said. The art of a paragraph break is excellent. You have 2 ideas. If your character is running through a list of thoughts and you see kind of that train of thought that they're having, like they have one idea and then you see them leap to kind of another idea, paragraph break, like show that they're jumping to ideas. If you have multiple characters in a scene and you're changing perspectives, wait till you at least change the paragraph to sort of get a new perspective in there, so you don't have all these POVs bleeding together and trying to communicate one chunk of an idea. Like, it's just these little things, and these are all like flexible rules, but these are general things to kind of keep in mind that just kind of make a scene just kind of read clean. Like, you just go through and it's not muddy, it's not bleeding, it's just, little tiny things that tighten it up.
Phoenix, you can keep talking for 10 minutes. I'm here for it. Seriously. I'm just saying, listeners, if you're in a rush, just listen to the last 12 minutes of this podcast. There was so much good advice here. Wow, thank you guys. That was some really solid stuff. Okay, let's hype up the next phase of this podcast. If I told you guys I needed to find, for the sake of this game, 2 authors that everyone in this room has read at least one of them, who are the 2 authors do you think I've chosen?
Is one of them Mr. King?
Let's throw names.
Patrick Rothfuss.
I'm not gonna say.
Leaning-
I'm not gonna say.
leaning
Just
this
throw
way.
names.
Tolkien.
More names. Come on.
King. Stephen King.
Sanderson,
Oh my God. Wolf Hall.
Sanderson and King.
Okay, here we are for the brand new game where which I like to call this game, I have a name for it, Sanderson or king. And Sanderson.
Oh yes, I love
Let's go.
We'll be
this.
so good at this.
Oh, you guys
I
are
love this.
Amazing.
So the name of the game is Sanderson or King. And James, you nailed it, right? I mean, you guys said King and Sanderson, but you really got to do. I thought, man, how do I find the most common denominator for all of us? And I thought, okay, all of us have read either this guy or that guy. So you must be asking yourself, Matan, what's the game? I'm going to show you a line, and I've picked lines that do not identify the book. It was hard. I had to go
Okay.
through
Yeah.
lines with no names, with nothing that will give it away. I tried, some of it's hard. And you, only by reading that line, which hopefully doesn't say too much, should tell me, is that the language of Mr. King, or is that the language of our Lord and Savior, Brandon Sanderson?
Because they both have very invisible prose in some places.
Yeah,
So this could be fun. Okay.
Do we have to like
All
vote
right.
or?
Or we just
Each one of you
screaming
makes a
names.
choice.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's not about speed. Everyone's gonna have their vote, and
Okay.
then we're gonna count points for successful guesses.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
I'm not gonna tell you how many rounds we're gonna have, because then you're gonna start calculating. Wow, we had 4 of King. We should have a few.
Yeah.
rounds.
Okay.
All right. So maybe there's 100 rounds. Okay. So I hope you didn't have plans.
That picture of Stephen King, man.
It's so good. I love the word
All right.
Sanderson. It's very like Fight Club.
King or Sanderson? Alex, you read it.
The massive building was enveloped in an aura of misty light. As the carriage approached, Censored could see that 8 enormous lights, I thought it was 8 enormous lizards, lights blazed out along the outside of the rectangular building. Okay.
King or
I'm going to say Sanderson.
I'm going to say
say
Sanderson.
King.
I don't know why. I
Okay.
just feel like it's King. I really
Yeah, I'm voting King.
look at that. The
Alright,
two
so
King
Phoenix
readers
and-
think Sanderson, and the two Sanderson readers.
Think it's King. Yeah, that's very funny.
That is
Wait.
interesting.
We're
Let's-
betraying
let's
Al.
Let's have it out loud real quick. Alex, King or Sanderson?
Sanderson.
James?
Sanderson.
Phoenix?
King.
Ali?
King.
And this was Sanderson.
Yeah.
That was a line from the
No.
Final Empire.
Okay.
And we're gonna put the points up, because I usually don't keep score. I just kind of run with it, but I want to have a winner this time. I never have winners in my game. Alex won. James won. All right. Can you see the
No,
points?
it's all white.
Oh,
Oh, yeah,
there
there
it
it is.
is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I made it. Yeah, I made it white naturally. Okay. James, you want to read the next one? King or Sanderson?
Sometimes the pick would strike a rock hard enough to flash sparks, and the shiver would travel up the wooden haft to vibrate in his hands. I'm going to say that's King.
Yeah, that's big King energy.
Well, the previous Kingers, what do you say?
Yeah. I'll say King again, but I don't want to
Yeah.
like
I want to say
play
King
the
again.
game by always voting King.
Yeah. I
I'll
didn't
try
want
not
to
to
think
do
it was
that.
King, but I feel like
You think it's
King
you
as
must
well.
you must be thinking to yourself, there's no way he would start the game with 2 Sandersons, right? That's what you're thinking. I bet that's what you think.
I'm trying not to meta it. I'm really trying not to.
I'm trying not to as well.
Okay, we got 4 votes for King, and this is
Yes!
indeed King. This is
Yeah.
a sentence from Pet Cemetery. So, Ali and Phoenix, welcome to the scoreboard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just
It's
trying
good
to-
be
That
And-
it's good to be here. That picture of King popped up just then, and I got the weirdest sensation of like, you know what? He's proud of me. Like I felt it. It was like, yeah, we guessed you, King. We got
Hey,
you.
you did
And
it,
then I
Phoenix.
remembered. I then in that moment
Good for
remembered
you.
that we know him. He does not know us, and I was like, oh dang it, no.
Phoenix, keep your mic on because you're reading the next one.
Okay. His relationship with his father had been like the unfurling of some flower full of beautiful potential. I'm going to say Sanderson for that one.
Same. I'm going to say Sanderson as well.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Right. I'll be here when you guys.
I'm gonna say King again. I'm gonna say King.
Only 97 rounds left, guys. So
I'm gonna say
I like this game.
King again. I don't know. Yeah, okay.
all right,
I'll
we got
commit to
an
King.
interesting round. We're gonna have 2 winners and 2 huge losers. Let's see. Who's
Huge
big
losers.
And this line was
No.
from the
Oh
shipping.
man, I should have got that.
Man.
So
Yeah.
Alex
Yeah,
went
I
up
did
to
not pick that.
3.
Wow.
You have a lot of rounds left to dethrone Alex, but Ali is climbing up the stairs.
She's back in the game.
He's back.
Yeah.
You're back, baby.
All right, Ali, you're reading the next one.
Okay. Very little of the stranger was visible beneath the thick, dark cloak he wore to protect himself. And I'm going to say Sanderson.
I'm gonna say Sanderson too.
Why? Because I had 2 kings.
I'm feeling a big Sanderson on that one.
Big Sanderson energy.
Big Sanderson.
Sanderson.
That's right.
James is quiet. Maybe.
I'll go King just to be different.
All right, and that was
Yes.
Sanderson from the Hero of Ages. So
I'm not gonna lie,
we got
the fact
4
that it had a cloak in it made me feel more that it was Sanderson.
The thick dark cloak. I was like,
Bit too close to some world building hints.
yeah.
But I mean, maybe
I'm trying
King's
to-
talked about some cloaks in his time.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely in that wheelhouse. Like that could be something out of
Yeah.
King can cloak.
oh, what's
King
the,
can
the
cloak.
talisman. Could be
Oh, the
something out of
vampire
Talisman,
one?
Sure. Salem's
Uh,
Lot. Yeah, I suppose. So.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I'll read the next one, I suppose. Yeah, Hero of Ages. Okay, his ego had grown the way a pearl does, layer by layer, until it is huge and poisonous.
King.
Is that
Definitely
King or
King.
Sanderson?
Thinking King, yeah.
Definitely King.
I'm gonna
King? We're going for King? Yeah?
I actually think that is the talisman. To be honest.
Are we going with King? Everybody said King, right?
I'll
yeah.
say King.
Okay.
And that
And
wasn't
that
meta
was
play.
King.
Cool.
All right, I'm not
King.
giving you points.
Oh yeah, it's
'cause
about
you're all
the
the
real
same.
estate agent. Yeah.
It'll be interesting at the end to articulate why we think it's one or the other. Because we're
Yes.
we're flying on
Mm.
intuition a little bit, aren't we?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I didn't give you points because you guys all scored, and I'm lazy to
Yeah,
get point
yeah,
thing.
fair enough.
Just remember you got one. Any volunteers for this big, beautiful paragraph?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Go ahead.
And they did have rich people here in town. Never mind what the travelers on the ocean said. Those would stop at this little port on the crumbling eastern edge of the censored and shelter from the storms in their cove alongside the cliffs.
Hmm.
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 I'd say Sanderson on that one.
Yeah, I'm feeling Sanderson.
The
I'm-
mind.
I'm
That's
feeling
fun and characterful.
hingy.
Are these normal storms?
Hmm.
What kind of storms are
I
these?
can see this in a
Yeah.
king context. I'm scared to say it though, because I don't want to lose. That's why. That's how that goes. That's how that works.
Did have rich people here in town. Never mind what the travelers
Yeah,
said.
this could be the game, Phoenix.
Sanderson,
I know.
yeah, Sanderson. Mm,
And so we got 3 Sandersons, 1 King,
I'll
or we got
say
You'll never catch up if you keep following the crowd, Phoenix.
that's true.
You
I'm
gotta
gonna
take a
say
risk.
king. You know what? Let's
Oh.
get a bit fiery, a bit spicy.
all right. Ready or not, here he comes.
Yeah.
Sanderson.
oh,
That was a line from Oathbringer. And wow, 100 rounds went by quickly, right? And that's it. And the winner is I'm proud to present you the crown, Alex Eldridge. Otherwise, yeah, it's fitting that you would win a game about Stephen King.
Was that 5 for 5? I think it was.
Was
Nice.
6 for 6.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
There you
Guys,
go.
There were
I-
94
Dang it.
rounds in there where we all got them right, so the points did not go up.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was intense, by the way.
Like,
yeah,
those
that's great.
94 rounds.
Yeah.
So that just shows us that even authors that have the reputation of not having flowery language, they still manage to have their own identifying kind of
Mm,
prose.
Yeah.
Can
Can we talk a little a bit about why
Please.
we thought each thing was
Please,
what
yeah.
it was?
Go
So,
ahead.
Mhm.
Do you want
I'll
to-
say I found the Sanderson stuff to be a little bit more purely descriptive. Like there was a little bit more like, this is actually what it is. And the King stuff tended to, and this might have been your own bias, but Matan in selecting lines, it tended to stray to the more abstract or metaphorical. I found.
If I told you how I did this, I'm not sure if your evaluation of me is going to decrease or increase.
You're gonna reveal your.
Did you use chat?
I literally did
GPT.
No. I literally did this. I opened the book, and the first page that I landed on,
Nice.
I tried to find the first paragraph that does not betray vampires, shard blades, anything that's like obvious, like
First bland sentence, yeah.
women in skirts, because that would identify it as a kink book, anything like that.
Yeah, or
that kind of
chambres,
stuff.
men in chambres.
Nice.
Cool.
Wow, you guys were amazing today. Some really good advice. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed listening to us rambling about what we think constitutes a good use of the English language. And again, look, at the end of the day, I want to go back to the tips given by George Orwell. He finishes it by saying, and I'm going to paraphrase, ignore these rules if it doesn't feel right. He called it barbarous. He said, but basically, if it doesn't feel right, you do you. And if you're not sure, grab a bunch of friends, have them read your book, and they will tell you if it works or it doesn't. Yeah. But the English language is beautiful. I invite you to dive into it. Grammar is not, it's not a disease. It's just open a grammar book and you know what? Just read books that you like. Read a little slowly. Try to see what you like about the sentence. Maybe you won't have a name for it, but I'm sure it's going to inform your writing. Any departing comments, guys, before I do the usual spiel?
Never do I feel more like an editor than when I'm reading a book and I see a funky thing they did with punctuation and I take a picture of it. Yeah. So that's something I actually do. So yeah, if you're reading something and you note something that they did with punctuation, or note something that they did that caught your eye or feels like it's a tricky needle to thread sometimes with your own writing, take a picture of it, because it kind of works. Punctuation, grammar, it works a little bit like law. It's like if you could find examples of it working and it working well, then you could kind of do it. It's very soft. The rules aren't as hard. The goal is communication, and punctuation set in there to show you how to communicate a sentence and a sentiment. So there you go.
That's a good summary. Have you successfully communicated in the best way possible at the end of the day? Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Thank you, listeners. If you had a good time listening to our chat, please leave a review in any platform of your choice in which you listen to our podcast. And this would be a good opportunity to remind you that you can contact us in the comment sections. You can email us. You can go on the website. We also have a mailbag podcast coming in the near future. So we're already collecting questions for that. And finally, we have our beautiful anthology, The New Mythic, up, thriving, available, waiting for you, with 6 delicious and creepy and incredible stories. You can find it on Amazon, our anthology, The New Mythic by Precipice Fiction. We also have, like I've promised in some previous episodes, we got some exciting news regarding the audiobook. Please wait for that. We thank you for your patience. And that's it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for coming on and sharing your beautiful advice. And this was us, Precipice Fiction.
See you next week.
Bye. When you asked me about that editing question, I went on about the clients that I had right now. That was like compulsory stress venting.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.